Hi, I'm Xenowave, and today I'm going to talk about chords. Chords are any combination of 3 or more notes usually played at the same time, like so. An arpeggio is when a chord is being played one note at a time, like so. Also, as we know, 2 notes being played at the same time is called an interval, but it can also be called a dyad. Chords are directly derived from scales, and we'll be going over many types of chords and the scales they come from. In a scale, if we play every other note from the first note to its fifth, we will get a chord called a triad. A triad is composed of the first, third, and fifth degree of any scale. Also, keep in mind that the first note of every triad is called the root note. Before we go any further, I would just like to go over the major, natural minor, augmented, and both diminished scales. So for C major, we start on C, and then go up a whole step, go up a whole step, go up a half step, go up a whole step, whole step, and half step. And then, 1, 3, 5, we get C major. For C minor, we use the formula where we start on C, and we go up a whole step, go up a half step, go up a whole step, go up a whole step, go up a half step, whole step, and then whole step. And there's C minor. If you play the 1 through 5 of that, you get a minor chord, or minor triad. For C augmented, you start on C, and then you go up a whole step, go up a whole step, go up a whole step, whole step, whole step, and then whole step. And there's C augmented. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's your augmented triad. So there are 2 types of diminished scales, and they are called the half-whole diminished scale and the whole half diminished scale. And those names come from the interval patterns that define those scales. So let's do half-whole first. Start on C, and then go up a half step, and go up a whole step, go up a half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step. And for a whole half, it's the same thing. Start on C, go up a whole step, go up a half step, and then whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step. For both of these scales, if you play the 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5, you'll get a diminished chord. A chord quality is what describes the chord. For example, major, minor, augmented, diminished. And as I've just shown, the scale the triad is derived from gives them their chord quality. If I have the F major scale, and I play 1, 3, 5 of it, I have F major. If I have the B flat minor scale, and I play the first, third, and fifth, I have a B flat minor triad. If I get a triad from either of the B diminished scales, then I have a diminished triad. So let's try B half whole. There's my B diminished. If I get a triad from the C augmented scale, then I have an augmented triad. The third of the chord is arguably the most important note of each triad because it directly influences the quality of the chord. So we could have C major and take out the fifth, and we would still feel like it's a major chord. But if we take out the third, we'll just have a fifth, and there's no real harmonic quality to it. And if we make the third minor, like it's very clear this is a minor chord, and that's a major chord. Before we continue, I'd like to go over more types of chords. I'll be going over 6, dominants, half diminished, and suspended chords. Keep in mind that when you see or hear a number in a chord name, it's always relative to the root note of the chord. Okay, so the major 6th chord is just a major triad with the major 6th. So if I have C major, I just play the 6th scale degree on top of that. So that's major 6. The minor 6th chord is just a minor triad with the major 6 added. Minor 6 chords can be derived from the Dorian mode, which is the second mode of the major scale. So if we go back to modes, if we want to find C Dorian, we have to find out what C is the major 2nd of, which is just B flat. So if I play the B flat major scale starting from C, I have C Dorian. You would think that C minor 6 is that, but it's this. The dominant 7th chord is just a major triad with the minor 7th added. Dominant chords can be derived from the mixolydian mode, which is the 5th mode of the major scale. So, if I want to find C mixolydian, I need to find what is C the 5th of in the major scale, which is F major. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So just play F major starting from C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, there's my dominant chord. And there's that minor 7th. The half diminished chord is just a diminished triad with the minor 7th added. This chord can be derived from the Locrian mode, which is the 7th mode of the major scale. So what is C the major 7th of? It's C sharp. So just play the C sharp major scale starting from C. The suspended chord has no third, so the chord itself is neither major nor minor, but it can be derived from the Dorian mode. So an example of a suspended chord is playing the 1st, 4th, and 5th scale degrees. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 4, 5. Which forms what we call a sus4 chord. Another example is playing the 1st, 2nd, and 5th degrees, which forms what we call a sus2 chord. Also, one more thing about sus chords, they always have the 1st and 5th scale degrees. Let's talk about chord extensions. Chords can have extra notes stacked on top of them to change the sound or feeling of the original chord. So if you play a major scale for 2 octaves, you'll have 7, 9, 11, 13. So these notes are called extensions, and we just really focus on the 7th, 9th, 11th, and 13th degrees of the scale. So let's go over some examples of chord extensions. Let's say if I have a C major 7, I'll play my C major, and I'll play the 7th degree of the C major scale on top of that, which is B. And there's my C major 7. If I want C major 9, I would play the C major 7 plus the 9th degree. If I want C minor 7, I'd put my minor triad and then add in the 7th scale degree of the C minor scale. So there's that. It's that simple. One rule to note is when we have a number above 7 actually, so if I want a C minor 9 or C minor 11 even, so let's try 9 first. Notice how it's called a C minor 9, but I'm still playing the 7th. When we have a number that's above 7, we just basically play every other note of the scale until we hit that degree. So if I want a C minor 13, I would just play C, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. I don't think I can play that with my computer keyboard, but you should get the idea. But I can try 11. So if I want a C minor 11, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, there it is. C minor 11. That's how we call it, and that's how we figure it out. So for another example, let's say I want a C9. By the way, when we say the letter and then just a number immediately, you can always assume that it's a dominant chord. So if I want a C9, I'll play my C dominant 7 and then play the 9. And there's my C9. And same rule applies for basically every chord type. So if I want a C11, I would play. And there you have it. Keep in mind, any note of any chord can be sharpened or flattened to change its sound as well. This is called alteration. Alteration is most commonly done on dominant chords. Like if I have a C dominant 7, I can flatten the 5th. So let's play C dominant 7. And if I flatten the 5th, I have this. And you would just call it C dominant 7 flat 5. Or if I have C sharp 9, so I would play my C dominant 7, 9, and then since I said sharp 9, let's just sharpen the 9. And now here's the chord. Or if I want a flat 9, I would just flatten that 9. And here's my C flat 9. Or if I wanted to play C9 sharp 5, I'd get my dominant 9 and then just sharpen the 5th. you should get the idea. One more thing to note about alteration, especially for dominant chords, is that the 9th, 11th, and 13th are the most altered. So when you're reading music or looking at chords, you'll definitely see like a, let's say, a C9, sharp 11, flat 13, or something like that. They're the most commonly altered. So now let's talk inversions. Just like how we have inversions of intervals, we have inversions of chords as well. So up until now, we have been dealing with chords in root position, which means that the root of the chord is the lowest note, for example, 1, 3, 5. But we can also play 3, 5, 1, or 8. To get the next inversion, we take the lowest note and put it up an octave. So like I just demonstrated, this is C major in root position. If I put C up an octave, I have C major in first inversion. And then if I put the E up an octave, I have C major in second inversion. Note that every chord has n-1 inversions, meaning that if I have a 3-note chord, that chord will have only 2 inversions. So like I just demonstrated with C major, I'll try C minor, I guess. So C minor, right? We're in root position, but if I invert it once, we're in C minor first inversion. And then if I invert it again, put this up an octave, now we're in C minor second inversion. If I put the G up an octave again, we will just end up with C minor root position, just up an octave. If I take C major 9, if I put C up an octave, that's my first inversion. If I put E up an octave, that's my second inversion. If I put G up an octave, that's my third inversion. If I put B up an octave, that's my fourth inversion. And if I put D up an octave, we're back to root position. And I guess one more example, let's try C minor 7. That's root position. First inversion, put that bottom note up an octave. That's C minor first inversion, or C minor 7 first inversion, excuse me. And then put the E flat up an octave. Second inversion, C minor 7. And then put the G up an octave. C minor 7, third inversion. And then you put the B flat up an octave. We're back to root position. That's it. So let's go on to chord notation. How are chords notated? Chord notation is commonly written as chord symbols or Roman numerals. I'll explain both. A chord symbol specifically tells you what note the chord is, followed by the quality, major, minor, augmented, so on, followed by some combination of an extension, alteration, addition, and or omission. So if I have, let's say, C major add 9, that's an addition. It just means play C major and add the 9th to scale degree. That's it. If I play C major omit 5 or C major no 5, I'll just play C major and take out the 5. Or you could combine those two and say like C major add 9 no 5. You'll just get this. In the long chord progression, it could look a little ugly, I'm not going to lie. But that's just how things are done. So here are some guidelines for chord symbols. Uppercase M means major, sometimes written as maj, like M-A-J. And also triangles are another sign used to denote major chords. So, for example, if I have this, or if I have C maj, that just means C major. We're going to get out of C, I promise. Well, we're not going to stick with C for the rest of the video soon. So a lowercase m means minor. So again, C minor or C followed by a lowercase m. It just means play C minor. Also written as C min. Dashes or hyphens are also used to denote minor chords. So this chord right here means C minor 7. The triangle means major. So this would mean D major 7. So for half diminished chords, you can spell them out as a minor 7 with a flattened fifth. So you can write it out as C minor 7 flat 5. Or half diminished also has a symbol, which is the slashed circle. So it'll look like that. I write down here. So you'll be like C and then just that symbol. So that's what it is for half diminished. So if you want to spell out C augmented, you could write it out as C and then aug, or C and the plus symbol, because this means augmented. So if you want to notate C diminished, you just write down C dim, or C and the degree symbol, because that means this is a diminished chord. And that's pretty much it for the chord symbols. Next thing is actually slash chords, which is just a way of notating inversions. Slash chords in general means play a chord over a certain bass note. So if I wanted to play G minor 7 over C, for example, I will write it out like this. And this is what it sounds like. If I have C major first inversion, it will be C major over E, which means play C major in the inversion where E is the bass note. Or if I have C minor over G, that just means play C minor over in the second inversion. So again, C minor, root position, first inversion, and then second inversion. Play C minor where G is the bass note, the lowest note in the chord. Alright, so now let's get into Roman numerals, which is my personal favorite. So if you don't know your Roman numerals, I know you didn't play Final Fantasy. So so I is just 1, I is 2, I is 3, IV is 4, V is 5, VI is 6, and VII is 7. This corresponds to the scale degrees of any scale. In uppercase, Roman numeral means major. If I have V, which means 5, in uppercase V, it just means play a major chord on the 5th degree of the scale. Lowercase means minor. So if I have a lowercase IV, it means play a minor chord on the 4th degree of the scale. So another important thing to know is any Roman numeral or chord symbol with a number directly after it is a dominant chord. If I have like V7, it's just going to be play a dominant 7 chord on the 5th degree of the scale, or play a dominant 13 chord on the 4th note of the scale, play a dominant 9 on the 2nd degree of the scale, and yeah, as I said earlier, the numerical value means the scale degree you played a chord on, and that's pretty much it. The only exception to the dominant chord rule is if the Roman numeral is lowercase. We know it's minor, so it can't be a dominant chord, right? So if I have this means play a minor 7th chord on the 4th degree of the scale. And, if I have a major 7 on the 1st degree of the scale, it'll look like that. Roman numerals can also be used to derive chords from scales. So for example, if I want to derive the chords from C major, what I would do is just play C major in triads. So C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, and then C major. And from there, I have all the information I need to write them down in Roman numerals, because we've already had the talk about scale degrees and stuff, so that just means a capital I, because I'm playing a major chord, capital, on the 1st note of the scale. And then we go to 2. It's a minor chord on the 2nd note of the scale, and then 3, minor chord on the 3rd note of the scale. And yeah, that's how you derive the chord from the scale, and you write them out in Roman numerals for diatonic chord progressions most of the time. And the same applies for minor scales and whatever other scale you can think of. I've seen it mostly used for major and minor. So now let's derive the chord from the minor scale, from C minor. Again, we play the whole scale in triad. So first chord, C minor. Move everything up the scale accordingly. Second chord is D diminished, and then Third chord is E flat major. And you just keep on going until you hit the end of the scale. Fourth chord is F minor. Fifth chord is G minor. Sixth chord is A flat major. And the seventh chord is B flat major. And then, we're back to 1. Again, to be very clear, you play the scale in key. So every note you move up the next scale degree. And that's how you're able to derive those specific chords from any scale, really. So yeah, that's basically what Roman numerals are mainly used for. And well, they're used to also denote chord progressions, which is basically just chords being played one after another. A very simple chord progression is 5-1, but we'll be in minor because we're cool. So play a major chord on the 5th degree of the scale, then a minor chord on the 1st degree of the scale. 5-1. Okay, so for this last part of the video, I'm just going to play these progressions and pretty much explain or translate the chord notation into the keyboard. And for the last progression, I have it written out, and I want you to fill in these blanks. The first chord and the last chord. It shouldn't be too strenuous. And whoever gets this first gets the comment pinned. Here's progression 1. Alright, so progression 1 is a 6-7-1 progression. So this means that for the first chord, play a major chord on the 6th degree of E minor. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to bring it down an octave. So 6, and just build a major chord. And then on the 7th degree of E minor, build a major chord. And then on the 1st degree of E minor, build a minor chord. And that's the progression. So here's progression 2. So the first chord is just F major 7, which is just, F major with the major 7th on top. And then the second chord is D7/F sharp, which just means play D7 in the inversion where F sharp is the lowest note, which is just D7 first inversion. And then the third chord means play G minor 7 in the inversion where F is the bass note. So that's G minor 7 third inversion. And then play a C dominant 7 in the inversion where E is the lowest note. So that's a C dominant 7 first inversion. That's it. Here's the third progression. So the first chord is C sharp major add 2. So this means, play C sharp major and add the second note from the scale. Then the next chord is A7, which is just major chord on A, and play the flat 7. And then the third chord is just C sharp major add 2 again. And then the fourth chord, so this is A diminished 7, no 3, or omit 3. So let's just start by playing A diminished 7. So A. So what you do is just get rid of the third of the chord, and you're left with this. That's it. And then the next chord is A major 7. So again, play the major triad on A, and then add in the 7th, and then A major 6, A major triad, and then you add in the 6. And then the next chord, B7 over A, which just means play the inversion of B dominant 7 where A is the bass note. So that would be third inversion. And then it goes back to C sharp major, add 2. And that's all that is. Here's progression 4. Okay, the first chord is just C major, and then C augmented, and then C major 6, and then C7, and then we have F major over C, which again, play the inversion where C is the bass note of F major, and then just C major again, and then the 4 diads. And for the last progression, this is for U, so C major over E, F minor, G major, A flat major. I have the second and third chords written out. I want you to write out the first and last chords in the same sort of manner, in order, and that's it. If you have any questions, definitely let me know, and have an awesome day.